everyone, it's Carl here with Tabletop Tango. I'm all alone today without Eric because I'm going to talk about a Savage Worlds setting called Crystal Heart. And Eric hasn't had an opportunity to read this book, so I'm going ahead and going to talk about it and get into some fun details about it. It's a very interesting setting. I won't really do a review, but it's got a lot of sort of unique flavor to it, which is pretty cool. I'm recording this kind of in the April 2020 timeframe, so we're all stuck in our houses because of COVID-19, and hope everybody's safe out there. And let's go ahead and pull up the book. Take me just a second here. All right, so here's the title page of our book, Crystal Heart. And what's the basic premise of the setting? Well, first off, it's based on a webcomic series from Up to 4 Players. And so that's up4players.com. And it's a really interesting comic. It's pretty fun to read. And so the basic premise of the setting is there was a previous civilization, or, you know, that's at least what's thought, that created these crystals. And these crystals have the power to affect the environment, to change it in unpredictable ways. They have kind of their own things that make them unique, or personalities, if you were. And so it's pretty interesting concept. So the player characters in this world play SYN, so that's either sin or sign, depending on how you want to say it. I'll say sign. And they play sign agents who go out and collect these crystals because, again, the crystals affect the environment. They do crazy things to sometimes, create creatures or monsters or, tidal waves, whatever. They affect the environment in crazy different ways. And so these agents of sign go out and collect the crystals. What's interesting is these agents also have a crystal that's in a harness embedded in them that allows them to take advantage of the power of these crystals, because only the sign have figured out how to harness and channel this power. What's interesting is all the characters classes, or all the characters in this game are human, but humans in this world have a stone for a heart, and that stone vibrates, and that's what pumps blood. The sign have replaced that with these crystals, and that's how they harness the power. So let's talk a little bit about the world. The world itself, there are 5 lands in the world, and I'm going to be looking through notes. So let me go ahead and get you, thought I had it, there you go, to the table of contents. So we'll go through that, and then I'll jump from page to page to show you what's there. So there's 5 lands in these worlds, and each land has kind of a unique way of thinking, things that are special about them. Just like on Earth, there's people who have, different cultural ways of thinking, doing things. They're kind of specialized, and that's the same for these 5 lands. And so the characters come from one of these humans from these 5 different lands, and each are a little different. So let's talk a little bit about creating your character. So in this book, you, again, play agents of sign. And so there's a set of, it's pretty much the standard character creation except for a couple of differences. And most of those are kind of the motivation and how the character is put together. So first, you define a reason to join SYN. Why do you care? What are your motivations to stay within this organization? Because everybody has to be an agent. And so that's important. Then you pick your homeland, and then you work on the traits, edges, and hindrances. So hindrances and edges, they add some. And so a lot of them are based on, page 17 I'll jump to. A lot of them are based on sort of the, a lot of them based on the place you're from, sort of your homeland, or they're aligned with being able to handle crystals better, or manipulate them, handle more than one crystal at a time, that sort of thing. And there's quite a few, not nearly that many hindrances, but there's quite a few edges out there. So and then every character has a background edge called crystal channeling, because the crystals are basically what provides the arcane powers to this world, and every character has a crystal embedded in them. And so there's a good batch of edges, not a lot of new hindrances, but some of them are based on where you're from. Some are, based on the crystals and that kind of power. So those are the basics, kind of what's there for as you pick out your edges and hindrances. So if we get further in, after you do all that character creation, there's the gear, which is pretty typical. There's a gear section. I won't get too much into it, but there's typical weapons for the different 5 human lands. There's things that are a little more technology, things that are a little more, old school. And then the last thing you do is you figure out who your supervisor is, and so you do team building. How did the team train together? What are interesting things that bond them? And you draw some cards to let the characters sort of come to know each other before the actual play starts, so that they're a cohesive unit. And then each character then gets a starter crystal. And the starter crystals, I'll talk a little bit about crystals later, but the starter crystals are a novice crystal that has, certain power and personality again. And then the book goes into just a ton of archetypes, that you can choose to use as your starting point. They would probably make great NPCs. So lots of stuff here, lots of stuff. All right, then there's a section on the sign, and that goes into sort of what it means to be an agent, what does it take, the legal jurisdiction of them, which they're not really a legal entity, but people defer to them, give them a wide berth, often, show great respect, sometimes take them in, feed them, clothe them, that sort of thing. Looking at my notes here. Good description of sort of what it's like to be part of the sign organization. And then it talks the agent code, what your duty is. Then one of the things is there's sign facilities that each have different services and things, as well as quirks about that facility that may make it interesting and unique. There's the Sign Citadel, which is sort of the big place that everybody might kind of coalesce to, and it floats around. There's a picture of it. Look at that. And then there's a hierarchy, obviously. So there's a lot here. One of the interesting things is this concept of requisition, which instead of using money to determine what gear a character will have or what gear a character won't have, it uses a requisition system. Now, you've seen these in settings before. This one's based on, you get requisition power based on doing your duty, doing the things that are being asked of you, taking quests, from the bulletin board, and then retrieving crystals, which is sort of the fundamental job of the sign is to get that. Then you use your skills based on that, roll for gear, use hearts, spades, diamonds. Again, we're drawing cards. So it's an interesting mechanism. I think it's useful. I don't like the concept of people having to use their paychecks to buy gear. I like the idea of requisitioning it, and this has a way of making things rare or easier to get based on how far up in this organization you've gone. And then there's a section on gear with protection, melee weapons. I didn't mention it, but the graphics in this book are very much tied to the style of the webcomic, and it's nice. It's not cartoony. It's not ultra realistic. It's just got a nice vibe to it. And so it shows a lot of the weapons. There's swords. You can see they're from the different places. But again, it's Savage World, so we're talking strength plus D4, strength plus D6. And then you've got grenades, which are pretty exciting. We always like to have grenades. And then, vehicles. One of the cool vehicles they have is what's called the tank. And this is sort of a all-terrain, well, they call it a most-terrain vehicle, but it's designed to take agents around the countrysides, which are, I didn't mention, but they're somewhat still wild, the countryside is, because travel between the 5 countries, realms, what have you, the 5 lands, is really just a more recent thing. People used to keep to themselves. There wasn't a lot of travel back and forth. And so it's still wild, but the tank is cool. I would give my agents a tank for sure. It's got room for folks. It's got room for supplies, and then it can hold up to 6 crystals. I think it said 6. So that's pretty cool. I think everybody should have one of those. Why travel on horseback if you don't have to? Then it talks about the 12 heroic agents, which, using these probably will help the game master have some hooks that they can use to get the characters engaged. Some of these might be mentors, what have you. And then the next section is crystals, which is the namesake of the game. And so there's a big section on crystals, how they work, what's interesting about them. So I mentioned that crystals are thought to come from, ancient society, or they might be natural. And the forces they wield are natural forces. They're not, magic. At least, here they're in the setting. They're not magic. They're kind of a natural process, and they're from bygone age, and they affect society. As some groups can take advantage of them, some haven't. So, what makes up a crystal? The anatomy of a crystal, it has a rank. And the rank is just like Savage Worlds ranks: novice, seasoned, veteran, heroic, and it defines how powerful they are, how much they affect their environment when they're what they call feral. Feral crystals are those that aren't under control, and so they are the ones that can create mud creatures, and if that's their inclination, or crystal monsters, or affect the weather or something like that from their power. Then there's also a theme. Crystal's theme is its main concept. It's what it's about, as it says here. And so it kind of defines, conceptually, what's the crystal all about? How does it think? And I'll show an example that they have. Then there's a benefit. Obviously, the crystals have some reason that the characters would want to have them embedded in them. They provide some benefit to the characters. And they mention it could be double. This is a walkthrough. It's not a review. And then it has a disposition. How does it influence kind of the bearer, the psyche of the bearer? And then crystal channeling is what the characters do to leverage, the power of the crystal. And so they can activate it just like you would an arcane background. And then you have penalties based on differences in your rank compared to its rank. And so there's a lot of information here, and I'm not going to cover all of it. But there's also a concept of desyncing, where you might have a critical failure and then you lose kind of that connection with the crystal and your ability. But what's really scary is it's replaced your heart. And so you could, without your crystal being in sync with you, or if it desyncs, then you start choking and you start dying, because that's what replaced your heart. So that's a bad thing to have happen. So, and then the concept of power stunts, where if you can figure out a way of using the crystal's theme in unusual ways, this may grant you more powers for that crystal, because you identified, you spend a Benny, you use this one-time effect that you can figure out how to, narratively bring it in, and it might become a permanent power. Not going to talk about the harness or socketing. Got a nice picture of it though. But let's. And then feral crystals are what I said. These are the crystals in the wild that aren't tamed, and they are what can cause the environment. Like here's a picture of a crystal that created crystal crabs, monsters. So as I mentioned, there's a lot on the crystals, and that's good because that's what the whole point of this setting is. So here's an example. So starting with the starter crystals. So here's an example of a starter crystal. So there's a description of it. There's a theme, and that theme is really, really helpful to your friends, being supportive. And so it gives you a benefit. So it gives you the reliability or reliable edge. And that's when you support an ally, you get a +2 for success. It has a disposition. And that disposition, in this case, is kind of a delusional major. So that's a problem, but it has a hindrance. And that is the belief that everyone is nice. So you can see that this crystal is all about being nice. And then here's some of the power. Let's do it. It's a boost trait. On my way is a teleport. And so all these powers then you can take advantage of based on the crystal you have socketed. And so there's a lot of them to start with novice level. And then in the appendices, there's also a number of crystals that are also been defined. But there's rules for creating new crystals in the book. So if you want to do your own crystal design or, again, do something unique, you can do that. Because, your characters are going to read the book whether you want them to. Or the players are going to read the book whether you want them to or not. And they're going to know about all these crystals. So you might want to create your own. And then the book talks about this concept of shard, which is a shattered piece of crystals, and they are sort of, they have power, and it's sort of one-use power. It's also something that you can use as sort of an adventure, pull the characters to go collect shards. So pretty cool. And then there's the next section is on the 5 lands, Zigama, Masai, I don't know, I'm not even going to try. But so there's the islands and then these 4 that are part of a continent. And it goes through sort of the lands, the setting rules, and then what you might find in the different areas. And so it has leads, which are I'm going back and forth, which use cards to kind of drive them, define them. So there's more information about, there's no magic here. The crystals are essentially natural, but I mentioned that. So life in the 5 lands. So it talks about travel and transportation, technology. So the technology is kind of, I guess, Victorian level. It's not, it's not medieval, so to speak. There's guns. You can see there's a vehicle that can drive around. So it's sort of a hybrid there, but certainly, I don't know, it's not science fiction and it's not completely fantasy. It's something a little bit different. So I guess you could technically say it's a post-apocalyptic world because, the previous ones who created these crystal technology is not around anymore. And then it talks about how people communicate, which there's no radios. It's all, sort of Pony Express in some cases. Like one race actually uses dolphins, which is kind of crazy. I think it's the Islanders. Talked a little bit about calendar, and then it goes into each of the lands where it talks about how the land is put together, what's in the land, the different, some of the interesting areas you might run into, and then major landmarks. So it talks about the cities, and here is an information for the cliff wall that you might run into for this particular land, which is, I think, I'm going to go back, Bogovia. All right. But you'll see that for all the 5 lands. And so you get a pretty good, it doesn't go super in-depth, you can see that, but it gives you enough for a flavor so that you can, the player characters who are playing these different humans from the different lands will have a flavor for what makes the land interesting, unique, their home setting, their homeland, and what makes them, they can play that into making their characters a little bit interesting. There's a section called Adventures, which is pretty cool. It gives them information on how to run the game, or at least how the developers felt that you should run the game. They talk about gives some crystals, what a plot should be, which is, multi-phase plot, going to get a crystal and all the things along the ways with maybe a side quest for a shard, and that sort of thing. And so it talks a lot about that. But what's really nice is they do give you, and I'm going to pop open my menu. So they give you a number of Savage Tales. There's a few Savage Tales, I don't know if you can read that on the side, that you can use in your adventures, and then there's a complete plot point campaign that you can use as well. So that's really nice. I mean, it's an interesting land, it's an interesting world. I like the concept of these crystals, which provide kind of this magic background. So that's all really, really cool. But the fact that they throw in a plot point campaign and some Savage Tales for the Game Master, all the better, because it is kind of a unique world, and to get that flavor, we can leverage some of their experience. So it's always good when a setting has a good plot point campaign. And then, of course, they have adversaries and challenges where they put, here's a Begovian commoner and, kind of people you'd run into, as well as the creatures you might run into. And then right at the end, there's an appendix which lists a whole bunch of extra crystals that you can use in your game that are, beyond novice, that are also seasoned and heroic, that you can leverage if you don't want to build your own crystals. So didn't spend a ton of time going through every little detail of the book. I just thought it was, I thought it was pretty interesting. I just wanted to give you a flavor of it. I think the bottom line is that it's really cool in the fact that it has this new concept of arcane background is tied to these crystals, and you slot a crystal in, and based on the one you slot in, you get those powers. But it's not a perfect thing, because you need to worry about desyncing, you need to worry about other things, and personality and how it might affect your personality and what it brings to kind of change the way your character is just by slotting in a crystal. So that's pretty cool. I thought that was very neat. And that's why I got this book, so that I could read through and get a feel for it. Is it a great, I didn't read a chance to really read Savage Tales or the Plot Point campaign. It's good that they have them. But I didn't get a chance to go through it all. Again, this is a walkthrough. I just wanted to give you a feel for what's in the book. Bottom line is I think it's pretty cool. Again, great concept, pretty good execution. You can see as I scroll through the books, good images. It looks really nice. It's laid out pretty well. So, not all a bad thing to pick up on Drive-Thru RPG or, buy a physical copy. And again, another great Savage World setting. So thanks much for listening. This was a shorter one, but you know what? If that's all I got to say, that's all I got to say. All right, so this is Carl. So let me transition in so you can see my beautiful face. So this is Carl. I appreciate everybody listening and enjoying. We'll get back with Eric when he gets a chance to get together again, and we'll dig more into some of the Savage Worlds rules. And until then, I've got a few more setting books that might be fun to go through and just talk about. So again, this is Tabletop Tango, and I am Carl, and we miss Eric, but thanks for watching.